Morning, and welcome to today's stream.
Hello. My apologies if I start getting laggy or anything strange. Please let me know. I was having some trouble hearing the audio just a little bit ago.
Yeah, we will pretend that you're not having a stroke then, right?
No max headroom here.
Right. We should just go
one
through.
thing I do want to point out to everyone: Raf has the link to come on the show. I just sent it to him 10 times in Slack.
Oh, I'm sure he'll join us. At some point. So, right, let's just quickly go through the introductions, and then we can get on to today's show, which is an interesting one. So, get back to the slides. So let's just introduce introductions. My name is Simon Leier, Flutter community leader. I am CTO of DevAngels London, and you can follow me on Twitter at DevAngels London. Scott.
My name is Scott Stahl. I am a community leader in Flutter community. Work with DevAngels London, and also am an organizer for GDG Cleveland.
And in the background, we have Randall. Randall, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Randall Schwartz. I'm a Dart Flutter GDE. I'm also full-time employed as a Flutter developer, and I'm also one of the co-producers of this show.
And we have a Simon joining us, another Simon. Hey, Simon, welcome to the stream.
Yeah, I'm the second Simon.
Yeah, right.
I'm
We would say
engineer at ClickUp.
Yeah, we were saying actually just before the show, how are we going to do this? Because everyone says Simon went to me, and I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. So I'm going to take Simon 1, and you can take Simon 2. I think that's we'll try that one and see how far we can get with it.
Yeah, there are a lot of Simons.
Yes, we're everywhere.
Yeah.
Terrifying thought.
And you said you're an electrical engineer on your profiles. Is that something that you started with before doing software?
Yeah, actually, I always liked software, and I thought learning electrical engineering was difficult to learn it on your own. So I decided to study it, and it's a great addition to software engineering.
I think there's an appreciation for software that you can have once you start going to the hardware and firmware levels that I think that every software engineer should have. It's something that kind of for me comes from those very early days of computing when you had like microcomputers or home micros, like these little things you could just program your basic on, and you're picking and poking memory addresses, you're modifying registers, you're communicating, you're doing all this kind of cool stuff where we're so far removed from the low levels of what a computer does nowadays in general purpose computing and apps that it's knowledge. I don't think it's ever going to go. I think there's specialist engineers now in software, right? So like we have people that are firmware engineers, we have people that are audio engineers, we have people. So, but I think that across the board, you need to have some sort of level of understanding of how that works, so that you can see how things are done on top, right? That's my personal opinion.
I'm sitting here making faces because I was trained in a lot of things in the military, and that included not just the basics of computing as in assembler, and then which we called macro emulation, then the micro emulation, which is going through the instructions that are permanently burned in on a chip, bit shift right, bit shift left. And we would have to troubleshoot to that level at the time. It was ridiculous.
You're showing your age now.
They gave us a program, a very short program to go through, and they said hand trace it and make notes. So it took all weekend.
You got the tracing paper out and started.
It was insane. It was printed out. It was nuts.
Yeah.
So we get this thing and we work all weekend, and nobody even gets 10% finished. It's insane. And we go in, and the instructors are like, "Yeah, nobody finishes." Now walk over to the machine and push the button and get your finger off the button before the light comes on.
Yeah.
I almost threw a chair at the computer. Okay, it was that ridiculous. But, this
is something that we deal with programming. Right? We talk about milliseconds and nanoseconds, right? like you talk about gigahertz. It's like billions of instructions per second. I mean, like it just even at thousands, it's hard to comprehend. And then you talk about like tens of thousands, 100,000, millions, billions.
If you really want to learn what's going on inside there, then you have to do two things. First of all, study Boolean algebra. Second, learn about something called a JK flip-flop.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
There's actually some.
I remember back when things were so close to 1 MIPS that people used to say 1 MIP, which didn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's millions of instructions per second. No, the S isn't there.
Second.
No, it is. It's MIPS, but I think they stopped having their meaning, right? Because where was it? Who was doing those? Was it when AMD first came out with their kind of x86 machines? They had Cirrus. They were like they ran at a different clock speed, but they would still have the same number of instructions per second. So you kind of had like this mental model of megahertz didn't mean the same thing depending on what chip you had, and it kind of all just like kind of lost meaning after that.
And if you really want to appreciate how cool Dart is, pick up C, and then realize you have to do your own destruction.
You're right.
And garbage collection.
And memory allocation.
And memory allocation.
That is definitely something that that everyone should do. Actually, just talking about this, it reminded me of a video that I'm going to share. So I'll put this in the chat for everyone else that's interested in this topic. Otherwise, and we'll move on because I've realized there's a few things that we haven't done yet. Here's a pointer for you.
Yeah.
So this is exploring how computers work with some Boolean logic and gates and so on and so forth. And that might be an interesting video for people to follow if they're interested in this. Okay, we should probably move on. I've realized we haven't done the do's and don'ts. So Scott, do you want to quickly do these and then we'll make some further introductions quickly?
Sure. Do's and don'ts: be nice, be respectful, be constructive. We are not on Reddit. This is YouTube. It's a little better. Don't post anything that's adult, rude, offensive statements. Don't advertise or promote your business. Don't say, I need work, please help me. Don't spam your same question over and over and over and over again. If you have asked your question within the last, 20 or 30 things that were said in chat, then you're spamming. And we'll move you to the bottom of the this sheet. And lastly, harassment of any kind, not tolerated. You know the type. Bigotry, incels, misogyny, etc., etc. And we share ban lists. So if you get banned here, don't be surprised if you suddenly can't log into other places too. It's one of the things that has kept the community pretty decent is if you're gone from one, you're gone from all.
All right. That's that. Now that's out of the way, we can get back to the good stuff. So, Simon, I've got some questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a bit about your project that you've been working on, Isar. I literally heard about this for the first time the other day, and it didn't occur to me. Was it called by a different project name before this? Is that why this
wasn't? No. That's what it.
Someone said Drift or something. I was like, "What? This isn't the same thing, is it?" I don't know.
That's yet another Simon.
That's that Simon Binder. Is that have I got people confused? That's probably what it is. So, you worked on Hive, right?
I did, yeah.
And is that kind of what gave you the thought to kind of approach it in the way that you've done with Isar? Is this just like a rethinking of Hive, would you say, or is this something new?
It basically is, yeah. I kind of hit the limits of the Dart language and the isolate model and like having no shared memory between isolates and things like that. And I wanted to implement queries efficiently. And that was just something that wasn't possible with Dart. Also the lack of virtual memory, for example, that all makes it very difficult to implement a database in a language like Dart.
I mean, what you end up having to do with something like, what was it called? What you have to do in that case, cases, you have to start like running the APIs for each different platform, like, calling like virtual alloc on Windows, or was it VM alloc from the POSIX API, map, and start doing all the memory mapping yourself. And you're going to that level, you're like, well, you're not going to beat what someone has done before. and I kind of like that. So Isar is built on top of MDB. Was it MDBX?
Yeah.
With libmdbx, right? Which is
fork of MDBX, yeah.
Right, and then that itself is an implementation of LMDB, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's how it is. Yeah.
So
MDBX is the fork of LMDB.
I want to just talk about this bit because I picked up. I was doing some database research earlier on in the year, and one of the things that I came across was LMDB. I'm going to bring up the wiki page here just so we're all sort of hopefully talking about the same page. If I can, there we go. So I'll make this bigger for everyone at home. This is LMDB, or Lightning Memory Mapped Database. It's been around for quite some time, actually. I think, right? Like, 2011 was in release, and I can't remember how I figured I got to know about this. So, see if I can get there. I think it's big enough for people to read. Hopefully, I mean, you can go find this. I'll put this in the chat so everyone can go read it themselves. It's kind of really interesting though, because LMDB itself, it follows the same principles as older sort of database models, where everything is in memory and you memory map the file into the memory space. I'm just gonna, so here we go. Internally, MDB uses B plus tree data structures. The efficiency of its design and small footprint is intended side effect of providing good write performance as well. Similar API to Berkeley, standard stuff. Now, here's the thing. LMDB treats the computer's memory as a single address space shared across multiple processes and threads using shared memory and copy on write semantics, known as a single level store. So that principle alone is what really makes this perform it, because there's just, when you write to that memory address, any of the memory addresses relate to the file, they're getting copied out to disk by the operating system. That's a really nice, efficient way. And also, copy and write solves the problem where you're dealing with multiple read/write locking, right? Like there's a bunch of that around copy and write. Copy and write, for those at home, is, so we talk about virtual memory. Like you have like 4 gig. Like let's say you have, let's say you only had 1 gigabyte of RAM. Every processor computer can see 4 gigabytes of virtual memory on a 32-bit machine, and it cannot provide obviously all 4 gigabytes at once. And what happens is it breaks the memory up into pages. These are small, normally 4 kilobyte units. There are 4 megabyte pages as well, and then they're swapped in and out from hard drive to RAM as required for when you access certain bits of memory. So the nice thing about this is you can get into a model where that's all the management of accessing the file, where you access and how you access it. As long as you all your accesses are based on page boundaries, you can get a really efficient database from this, right? And this is what the key principles are of LMDB, and that's what it's talking about in that single sentence, basically. The problem is that these kind of databases were dropped, and it explains in the next section here. They were dropped because of the 4 gigabyte limit. So as I just said, in 32-bit, 4 gigabytes was the maximum virtual address space you could have, which suddenly meant that if your database was more than, actually it's 4 gigabytes for all the kernel and everything that you're running for your process. So you end up with like only probably 2 gigabytes in most systems. So in essence, you start reaching that limit, and when you start reaching that limit, these things were just dropped on the floor, because it was like, well, we had to come up with new techniques. We have to start memory mapping information in and out. So it followed on. Now this is what it talks about today. However, 64-bit processors, mostly 48-bit addressing is used, which gives you access to basically 128 terabytes of database size. And now this is kind of what we're looking for. So for larger databases and so on, this is even more efficient, right? Like having huge databases in memory at once is super efficient. And this is essentially how like Redis and other things kind of work in that kind of essence. Now, we spoke about this, so and I'm going off on a tangent here, but this is like a key value. So if you look up in the details, it's a key value store with binary trees, B plus trees for searching and indexing. This is how every database is made, right? Like this is the fundamental layer that every like you think MySQL, SQLite, all of these things, they essentially work on top of this kind of a storage layer, and that's what LMDB is. It's the storage layer. So MDB is I don't know enough about libmdb MDBX, which is you're using a fork of that. Is that just like a nice interface to LMDB, or is it providing like an API layer on top?
It has basically the same API, but it's more actively developed, and it has a few bug fixes, a few improvements, and just small improvements over LMDB.
That's, I mean, great. I mean, that's what we want, right? I've spoken a lot about some of the points in here, and we don't need to go through. I'm not going to go through a Wikipedia article, but it's worth reading, especially some of the other things that the system employs, like MVCC, multi-version concurrency control, which is super important as well in terms of dealing with multiple threads for reading without dealing with the problem of locks. So, I mean, efficiency. I'll give you an example. So I just wanted, this is again for, I know I'm talking a bit here, but for the people at home, a database is just a file, right? Like right now, you can write a piece of software that says open file, write some data to the file, close it. You've just now made a database for your project. It hasn't got any format to it. That's how you write the data to the file, right? So, and the same goes for, reading and writing. Just reading and writing to a file. That is a database, right? What you want is an efficient way to read and write from that file. So you get the early database formats are simply record stores. So this is where you set aside how much data you want for each record of your data. That's each row of your table, let's say. And then by setting that aside, you then just skip that many, multiply that by the index, and you've suddenly skipped each row. So let's say you want to get the third row from a table. You say 3 times, let's say each row is 512 bytes. It'll be 3 times 512, jump to that place in the file, read 512 bytes. Now you've read the third record. It's a super simple system. And you can then start building indexes up, which would be like separate listings of, well, E starts at record entry 5, and Z starts at record entry 2000 or something. And you can start doing some really simple lookup tables and so on for various things. The interesting thing for this is this with LMDB, this means that you've got a really efficient way of accessing data. Now, this is perfect. I don't know if you, so am I right thinking, Simon, this is written in Dart, right? So you're taking advantage of FFI to communicate with libmdbx, right?
There is a Rust layer in between. There is
okay.
Isar core. It's written in Rust, and it communicates with MDBX and implements queries, indexes, and stuff like that, and provides an API to Dart FFI.
Great. So efficiency is the top level then, going to that model. It also, I guess that the Rust stuff is compiled for each different platform, so you really get kind of, what is the support platforms for?
All of the platforms are supported.
All of the platforms, every platform supported.
Yes.
So you work on Solaris, right? No, I'm joking.
No, I think all the Dart platforms are supported, and for web, obviously, I had to find a different solution.
So does web use like local? What's it called? Is it local storage? No, there's a local DB, isn't there? Like a database
index
for the
DB.
browser. Index DB. That's index DB. Yeah. So that's you're using index DB with like a layer on top that just like kind of interfaces to that. Yeah. I mean, do you know if there's many people using the database solution with web? Is that?
There are some, because I always get bug reports. So obviously great, right? Some people are using it. Yeah.
I think we want to just bring up the package here, just so that we've been speaking about this. Actually, I'm just thinking we've got another guest actually with us. Majid, do you want to join us on the stream? I don't know. Yeah, we got a nod. We got a nod and a thumbs up. Hey, Majid, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I was actually enjoying your talk with Simon. I mean, both Simons. So very,
Simon
very
one,
nice.
Simon.
You know, I actually had a video show with Simon, Simon 2, where we went like deep into this database and stuff, but like practical stuff. The things that you mentioned right now, Simon 1 is like too advanced. So, but we went to the practical stuff with Simon, and then he showed me how we can use, and he promised even come back once more to go to the Rust layer and explain how that layer works. So hopefully we can also cover that.
Yeah, I didn't forget that.
Sure.
So
But hello everyone. Sorry, I was so excited to listen to you all. Sorry.
So the home of the package is Isar Isar.dev, and looks like there's some documentation. I haven't taken a look through the full documentation yet, but yeah, here's the package. You can grab this on pub and start having to play around with it. And all the features that we've been talking about, a lot of that sort of work, and not this is again, sorry, to be clear, Simon, this is not putting down like what you've done, but a lot of the great features that you kind of get from this because the underlying choosing the underlying platform, right?
Absolutely, yeah. LMDB is a genius implementation. It's really cool.
So that's given us the ACID semantics as well, and
yeah.
So I can never. I'm gonna literally have to. I'll bring this up. I can't. Do you remember what ACID says? That's what I can never remember.
I always forget.
I know. So do I. ACID DB. I know. Let's just see what. Oh, ACID DB. Let's just see what. It's got to be like.
No, it's atomacy.
Yeah, atomacy. Something.
Consistency. Let's remember consistency, isolation, and
how does this not tap on Wikipedia? What Wikipedia's let me down?
Durability. That the D stands for durability.
Oh come on! I'm ACID DB. How is Wikipedia got to have a page on this, right?
Everyone brace because Simon's about to put out a flurry of tweets telling people to donate to Wikipedia so that they can get the rest of the links put together.
I'll make the page up myself if I didn't have it. Right. Yeah, so here we go. Atomacy, consistency, isolation, durability, which is like basically you need all of this if you want to have any database that in the world basically right now. Like you cannot have, you can just imagine two readers getting a problem because they haven't got consistency. One reads one value, the other reads another. Same goes for the durability and automaticity, whatever. This one is about writing as well, making sure that you don't overwrite some other writer's value and so on. So there's it's worth, if you don't know about databases, reading this up. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, static typing. I did like so you're using code generation, right? So the go on, please explain.
Yeah, I use code generation, and that's something I'm quite proud of because you can write queries using like a query builder, and it's impossible to write a wrong one. You only have the methods available that are valid, and it uses static extensions, and then you can't get it wrong basically, or you will get a compile error.
Nice.
You can, for example, type or 2 times in a row.
That is awesome. That is really good. That's awesome. Is there? I noticed one of the other kind of features I really liked when I was skimming through this earlier. Actually, let me see if I can bring this up here. Oops, sorry. Was also the not just obviously how quick and easy it is to use. You put your annotations on your model and away you go. That you have this Isar expector. So does this? How does this work? Does this? Do you have to download the database? Do you connect to the running instance?
This is actually an older image. It has a new implementation now. It lives at inspect.isar.dev. And as soon as you start the app in debug build, you get a link. and you click it, and it connects with a WebSocket to inspect.isar.dev, and there you can see the database contents in real time and run queries and delete stuff and so on.
That's awesome. My question is, does it support export and import?
Not yet, but that's easy to add.
So that's
export is already supported. You can download the whole thing as a JSON, and import is one of the next things I will add.
Because to be honest, like one of the, I mean, to be honest, if you've got APIs, it's not too much trouble to do it yourself.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of. The key is to get a performance export and import, right? And that's always the problem with these things. I mean, one of the things I feel for me that is always to be clear, what are the use cases for this, right? Because we're talking about databases, but every app pretty much has to have a database in the back of it. Like, if you want any sort of offline behavior, you need to store the data somewhere, right? And fundamentally, you normally use SQLite. That's kind of like the go-to sort of standard one that everyone uses for ages across the board. I know Hive's been an option around for a while, and to be honest, Hive has never really taken my particular interest in as an implementation wise. And as soon as I came across this, I was like, no, this is what I want. This is what I want from a database. And for me, you could use this on a lot of APIs could even use this in server side. There's options there, because if you've got a good export import option, a way of backing up and a way of restoring, it's like a command line utility to kind of manage the database as well as not just this visual one, but a command line, then you could start doing migrations and start having a really good database solution for server side as well.
And MDBX scales really well. It can handle hundreds of terabytes of data, no problem.
I mean,
if I remember correctly, Simon, too, I mean, you mentioned that, well, there are actually use cases for Hive too. Although it's it's not a database for these type of scenario that now we're talking about, but it's a perfect scenario for handling, let's say, feature flagging, let's say, something like that. Like you have a simple parameters in a simple Boolean type, or stuff like that. It just works perfectly for those scenarios, small things.
Exactly. It's a nice replacement for shared preferences with better typing and where you can store objects and stuff like that. But it's not a real database. It's a bit in between.
I was gonna say, I mean, you can just, but the looks of this as well, though, you can use this for that same solution, right?
Yeah. But you can't store dynamic data. You have to commit to
why would you want dynamic data anyway? No, I'm just kidding. The thing is, I would go to the sort of aspect of if I wanted dynamic data anyway, to store it as JSON, right? A JSON
for sure,
and kind of do it that way.
Yeah, I was just thinking that would probably need to be the way to go, because if you're working with web, a lot of times, for better or worse, you end up dealing with some JavaScript, and that introduces a rather dynamic factor. Simon L, which that's a useless address too. That doesn't work. Looks like we have got a bunch of questions here. At least 5 of them are database related.
Cool.
2 of them are not.
Let's get to some questions.
Let's see if we can hit the ones for Simon first.
Simon 1 or Simon 2?
Funny. Is Isar offline? Is Isar an offline database only, or can it be used for online storage?
Just offline for now. It doesn't synchronize by itself.
Okay.
Yet.
I mean, I was going to say, it wouldn't be, in essence, to have your app do that. That wouldn't be that too expensive, because you can make a query and see what has changed between 2 data sets. I mean, there's not the kind of thing. I do see that there've been quite a powerful way. I mean, the problem is, without having an API or a I guess you could provide an interface, right, that allows people to implement synchronizing.
My plan is to provide change tracking. I don't want to go the route of Objectbox or Realm to provide like a proprietary server that you have to use. I just want to provide an API that makes it really easy to synchronize with any backend.
Can you, with your mechanism, do you have like support for like Pragma kind of system where we can like general metadata that we can append into the database? Because that's also another valuable thing. If you're trying to do synchronization, you want to like, I guess you could just make like a key value table, like a key value model, but it kind of feels like maybe there's room to have that as like a fundamental sort of thing built into the database store.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to consider, but I didn't come up with a good solution yet.
Okay. Moving on. What's the pros and cons difference between Drift or more published by Simon and published by Simon?
I guess it's just the choice between SQLite and something else. Drift is a really cool solution if you want to use SQLite, but if you don't like SQLite, then Isar is maybe what you want.
Does Isar support a query language?
It doesn't by default, no. But it's super easy to implement because that's what I did with the inspector. The inspector has a query language and it just runs it. It compiles it to Isar query.
I mean, you essentially your code, like it's very much like you're like in Flutter you have UI as code. It's very much like your queries become code. So rather than having that extra step of interpreting your query string into a series of statements that you want to run against the database or a series of instructions, you're just essentially just building that query string up using the extension methods you're talking about earlier, right?
That's exactly how it works, yeah.
With regards to Simon, what Simon Binder made with Drift, I believe, and he's going to tell me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, when I see him next, but I believe the SQF-Lite, Drift and SQF-Lite sort of both use method channels to employ the native system, because I know the SQF-Lite original package, I don't know if it still does, but I remember it used to use the Android implementation for SQLite, and then the iOS implementation of the SQLite for CoreDB. So, you know, you didn't have to ship SQLite within your application, right? But I think that's to the detriment of performance and also compatibility a lot of the time. So you can get into what used to, at least on Android, what used to do with Android apps is get into the situation where you wanted to use, let's say, this is going to take people back right ahead logging on SQLite, which wasn't included at the time in the version that it was shipping in the operating system. So you just had no option, right? You just couldn't use it because it doesn't ship with the operating system. So you would have to ship a copy of your own SQLite binary with your app.
I think Drift now also supports FFI, but I don't think it supports asynchronous operations. So everything you do is synchronous in your UI isolate.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
same for Realm and Objectbox.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So has that changed with Isar? Does that?
Of course it has. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Isar runs your queries in a background thread and brings the results back to your UI isolate.
Is there a what was I working at recently? There's a performance like guesser that happens with, I can't remember what it was now. It happens inside Flutter somewhere as part of the new system where basically if something it runs in isolate only if it's going to take a long time. So they kind of like guesstimate up front. Is it gonna be okay just to keep running it on the same one? Is it that way, like if it's a simple query to get one value back rather than having the overhead of going to an isolate and back with the ports, you end up just with a simple quick query on the UI. Is that something you thought about doing?
I don't use isolates for Isar. It's really background threads.
Right, so that's happening inside the Rust side of it.
It does, yeah.
Right. Okay. So you're getting the power of multi-threading all from the native side, and then the Dart can continue with its main isolate simple.
Exactly.
I like it a lot.
But of course, the decoding still happens in the UI isolate, like the transformation from basically native objects to Dart. and it still might make sense to run that in an isolate.
I mean, there would only be a problem if you had like a very large query data set coming back in one chunk, and normally in that time you want to kind of do like a limit where you're kind of like paginating that content anyway, so you shouldn't really get into that situation if you're doing things right.
Yeah, everything below like 1,000 is no problem at all.
Cool. All right, moving on with other questions about how databases work to start with, or about databases in general. Has anybody tested Realm and have any feedback on it?
I've not personally tested it. However, I do know that Isar has, I think, is it one of those object bucks in Realm in your little stats examples? Is that it?
Yeah. People ask so many times about benchmarks, and I'm not a big fan of benchmarks because they're always wrong. Basically, it depends on what you ask. Yeah, but Isar doesn't do bad, we can say, at least.
Okay.
I'm just going to bring up the stats quickly just on stream here. So this is what we're just talking about. So if anyone's interested, take your screenshot now, or forever hold your peace. It's in the README of Isar, so you can go find it later. But yeah.
All right. Okay. Couple of questions from somebody here. Looks like they're on a theme. I think they're wanting to hack an app to try to figure out what database they're using. That's what it sounds like.
How to identify which database is used for a specific project? You're going to need to rephrase your question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, okay. And this an expensive one.
Okay, I can tell you now. I can tell you what the solution is to that question, and that is if you look. I can definitely do it from the Android perspective. There's AppBrain, I think it is. What AppBrain will do is it will break down what libraries an app is using, and list them on like a Play Store kind of like deal where you can go into all the apps, and yeah, you can then look up. Like, let's say Uber, you so SQLite, you click on SQLite, it'll show you all the apps that use SQLite, for example.
You know, it's the Google Play Store has some super secret kind of thing where they can do that too, because a couple of years ago, somebody went looking through to see which ones were using dependencies on things with Flutter. Because at the time, it was the only way to get an idea of how widespread the use of Flutter was. So let's see here.
I'm going to just kind of bring this up quickly, just this kind of continue to answer that question. Yeah, so I've just gone to AppBrain. I just went to appbrain.com, searched Netflix, here, clicked on the app. Here's the app. It was about when it got updates and all the rest of that crap. Right, but down here at the very bottom, development tools, Jetpack Core, Google Cloud Messaging. They use the JSON library. They use OKIO library, so on and so forth. And there's Realm. So there you go. That tells you Netflix is using Realm. So happy days. So, yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. And we've lost Simon. And he's back. What is the relative performance and query as size grows compared to SQLite?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
Make some benchmarks and tell us.
Yeah, I didn't do any tests.
I think I might
be interested too.
I would be interested as well. And to be honest, the model that SQLite works is very similar, right? Like under the hood, the model that the underlying model it works, storage mechanism is very, very similar. Try it, see. I mean, to be honest though, like you have to be. I mean, we talk about these performance numbers quite a lot, but unless you're really pushing the limits of your solution, you're not going to see any big difference, right? Like you really have to be like, I said this to someone before, like they're talking about performance. I'm like, how often do you run that code? When someone clicks on the button, how often do they do that? Once. I'm like,
yeah.
Does it matter if it takes 10 more milliseconds to do that or 100 more milliseconds to do that? Is it even noticeable, right? And these are the kind of things that you have to think about, right? Yes, if you're doing something with a database that you're doing consistently always having some sort of memory churn, yes, you want to look at performance. But for the most apps, it's not a big concern.
Yeah. And if you're really, really curious, don't forget, I believe, Simon, the code is open source, so people can see it and they can sit down and do the O of N calculations and then get back to us.
Yeah.
Yes. Please tell us how it performs for you in your use case.
There we go. Come on, man. You want to know how performant it is? Show us the big O. All right. Do you always have to copy a resource database from assets into memory as opposed to dealing with original DB files?
I'm gonna just caveat this with a point. So, Callan, the problem is assets are read-only, so you're always going to have to make a copy, right? I don't know if, and please tell me if I'm wrong, Simon too, but can you ship a pre-made database with your app and then drop that resource? Would that be a viable idea, or does the versioning of the database preclude that from being a viable?
You should be able to, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would always ship like JSON, and Isar has a very performant import method that runs natively, and I would use that and just ship JSON.
I've got a question for you. That answers that one, right? I mean, I don't. So obviously the problem. Sorry, I just want to be clear. The problem with doing what you've just said is that there is going to be a latency, a first-time usage latency, right? So when you first start the app, if you need to initialize that database before you can actually use the app, then there's going to be an amount of time it takes to pass that JSON and process it, right? Yeah. I do. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So yes, install. There you go. Right.
But it runs in background, so it will not like jank up your loading screen or anything.
Sure. I just mean like there might be, like, let's say, I don't know, you're using the database to store something. You need to have access to that before you can show your UI. Then of course you're gonna have to pause your UI. The nice thing about dropping a pre-made database is that it's just instantly readable, right? You can just load it instantly. There's no lag. I wonder if there's like an intermediate form, something which is like not easy to transform from one to the other without passing. But then I don't know if it's efficient anyway. You'd have to be shipping a lot of data to really be.
You need to ship a huge JSON to even notice it.
I mean, I'm not joking. I've seen some terrible things like 32 megabyte JSON download from some server that they wanted to pass on the fly every time the app started up or something like this. I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. Anyway, go on. What's this? You're muted, Scott. But
Hey, somebody's got to do it. All right. Bouncing back, I think a little bit, but just to cover it real quick again. Does Isar synchronize over simultaneously running isolates?
Absolutely, and it even sends change notifications across isolates. So if you listen to a query on one isolate and insert stuff in another, you will get notified, and it will assemble the query results in background and send it to you.
I've just thought people are going to now use this as a new inter-process communication between isolates now. This is just, it doesn't work as efficiently between my two isolates. Oh, no. Yeah, no, but it would work. I mean, what's scary is I would want that because I could just deal with objects. No, because you just deal with objects, right? I don't have to deal with the serialization and isolates and the ports of isolates. Like, you just want to be able to say, send this object to this other place, and it just does it. Like, you don't have to deal with anything, right? Yeah. I discussed. Sorry, while we're still on this topic, what you just said, the watching, that is one of the features, of Isar that when I saw it, I was like, yes, I want that, right? Like being able to have like something, some process happening in the background of your app, let's say synchronizing with the server, downloading some data, putting it into the database, and then your UI be able to watch the database for those changes and to just rebuild as those changes come in is just so powerful. and it's one of the reasons why I think they added that in SQLite. I can't remember. It was like an extension at the very beginning. I'm going back a bit now. I don't know if it's still widely supported, and it's one of those kind of like extra things, but also trying to deal with notifications and databases like SQLite. They're not really meant for that. So yeah, I kind of like the idea that there's this kind of object store kind of database mechanism has watching this. Brilliant.
Okay. Some folks have been waiting with other.
Say again.
I was just saying some folks have been waiting with other questions.
We'll get to it.
Yeah.
Good time.
By the way, come on here in person and say that, Raph. come say it to my face. All right. This one's interesting. If I install my progressive web app on Windows or Mac OS, does the PWA use the web part of the Flutter or Dart packages, or do they use the respective Windows and Mac OS? It ends up not even being a PWA on the desktop, does it? It's an app.
So no. If you install a PWA, it's all web-based still. It means that you don't have to go to a website to get to it. That's all it does.
Okay.
Literally, it's a shortcut to a standalone instance of Chrome or whatever browser running in a tab. Like, it completely uses JavaScript. It does not install anything native. And PWAs also don't have access to any of that native stuff still, right? It's the same as if you run it on a website.
It's actually
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mitch.
Yeah, please.
It's actually exactly the tab that you open like in Chrome or any browser. Yeah. Instead of having everything else like header, footer, whatever, it just gives you that context. Like, it's exactly the browser that you, even if you have like a PWA on Firefox, install it there and install it from Chrome, you get two different PWA of one website because you open that through two different browsers. So it's like the isolation is inside that, browser, which is technically the sandbox.
It's the same sandbox mechanism that all the browser tabs use. Yeah.
Okay. Now, let me throw a question out here, okay? I am reminded of Jurassic Park. Let's not become so enamored with the fact that we could that we don't bother to think of if we should. Why on earth would anyone want to put a PWA on a desktop when it is going to have to be interpreted code? It's going to have to run through JavaScript, through a browser tab. And the other alternative is, hey, we can make an ahead of time compiled binary executable that runs on the native desktop that's actually going to have access to storage. Whereas
you just hit the nail on the head, right? So the answer is, as a user, they don't know. Most users don't know any better. And as a technical user, we know what we want. And that is an efficiently running software on our machines, not eating up piles of resources when they don't need to, right? And not be interpreted and all the rest of it. So the answer is, yes, that's what we want. But as a business, from a software development perspective, no one's been able to develop apps and them to be affordably developed across multiple platforms because it takes specialist development knowledge from every single platform to do that, and teams potentially on every single platform. And it was very much over the years, very much quite a big expense, right? Now with Flutter coming along and now being able to take your one code base and compile it. I mean, there's always been a way with Java, right? So people have been doing Java cross-platform solutions for a while, but then Java itself comes with a lot of legacy and a lot of issues around that, right? So having a new solution that can compete on that level, that you can have a natively compiled app that you can install and be performant, to me is what changes the idea about what is a PWA, right? In that sense, like what is that kind of like install from web approach?
There's one more thing actually, Scott. Like, let's talk about it look at it as an architecture perspective. So an architect said there actually depends like whether you want that PWA or whether you want an executive, as you said, executable application. There are actually not just about the technology, but it's also about like how you maintain this. Like think about some application that they do not require any like native access. They've just like a very simple application, but they still need like a big screen, or you want to actually get out of the web, the browser, let's say, and you have it as a home, like an icon of an app on your home screen and stuff like that, right? But it does not require such a big performance, access to low-level API and stuff like that. And also, your company wants to hot patch it every time, so that you run, your application, or send a feature to you. Like a good example is Google Keep. So this is an application you definitely can build with Flutter or any other cross-platform for desktop. But does it make sense to have these resources to make that? So whether you can have only a web application for that and even maintain it right away everywhere in all platforms just by running that via web URL, right?
I think we'll have this discussion again. And I think, Majid, I want you back on for this discussion. We should get Mark Thompson on and to discuss PWAs with us, and we'll have a nice big conversation around that.
That's going to be interesting.
But the end of the day, I think that once Flutter, and I say once because once Flutter has over-the-air updating capabilities, right? They may not be shipped on certain platforms that don't allow you to do that on iOS, right? But once you have that capability of being like install update and it just does like a hot restart internally, and the app doesn't even have to close, and it just loads up with a new code that you're running, that's to me a game changer in terms of like desktop updatability, right? Because currently, like desktop and updating apps, the app stores have that kind of managed, right? Like once iTunes came out and doing like the App Store and all the rest of it on Mac, and now the Windows has the Windows App Store, right? That kind of update process is kind of still there, right? But each app can go do their own thing. So I think
that actually reminds me of Cordova time. I'm not sure if you have worked with Cordova.
No, we don't go there. We don't go to PhoneGap. No.
Let's escape. We're going to escape now.
More questions.
Can an overlay be added during a init state without add post frame callback?
Actually, it's a good point. I have no idea. I've not. So the thing here is you don't want to do anything that manipulates the context tree. Uses the context normally during an init state. That might listen to the context. However, I think overlay.of is just a read. It doesn't do an inherited widget deal. So you should be able to do it. Whether or not it will work is another matter. The thing is, what is the difference? I was going to say that. I mean, adding a post frame callback or doing schedule microtask and putting your overlay of add, insert, whatever. You don't. Why not use that? Also, you don't have to call set state. There should be no need to call set state to do an overlay insert thing, unless you need to look to see if you have your resulting overlay entry to change some other UI, right? Like, yeah. Any other comments from anyone?
I'm just running around here trying to find the next questions. Let's see.
We have some other questions, don't we, here for Isar, I see.
Yeah, a couple of them.
Oh.
I'm driving. Keep your hands off. Should the Isar objects be used throughout the app, or does the database then dictate too much?
So I personally think that you should not do that, right? So I kind of, the thing is that you can't, like the point here is you can, right? Because it's annotations on top of the models. There's no reason why you couldn't, from my perspective, strip out those annotations and put your implementation in, and your app would still work fine, right? You could even like redirect those implementations of those getters and setters and whatever else off to doing other things, right? But from my perspective, you should, any external package like querying the Isar objects, you should abstract away from your main business logic so that you can implement them in a, let's say you want to switch it out for like SQLite, you could go do that, right? Like you should be separated away. So in that sense, you should probably have a domain model and your view model, or however you want to name them, but a separation of the two. Right. Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. Like Isar objects, they are normal Dart objects. It's not like Realm where there are some magic. But I agree, you should separate your UI from the database.
I mean, I've seen this, was it Podos, right? plain old Dart objects. So we used to have Pojo from plain old Java object, right? But they're just Podos. We need to get that term used all the time.
Alrighty, let's see here. Another Isar one. With Isar, would you store data multiple times like NoSQL, typically so it can be used as needed? With SQLite, it is possible to load any new data structures from the database through joins.
That's a good
sorry,
question.
I'm looking around my camera at the questions here. So I'll go.
Yeah, so always keep in mind, joins are not for free. Like everything that a join does on the database level, you can also do in your app. They're quite expensive actually on mobile devices. But with Isar, you also have links, which are not as powerful as joins, but quite similar. So you can link between objects and only store them once.
It also depends on how you do the join as well. So certain joins, you need to use the right join for the right reason. So go definitely check up your SQLite, your SQL syntax, because you'll be surprised what difference it can make when you do like a inner join versus an outer join, or join left versus join right, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it probably highly depends on the use case.
Yeah, it always depends. And again, the other thing is like make indexes, right? Like if you're trying to confirm performance, more indexes the better. You start using composite indexes. Like there's so much you can do to like increase your performance. But the initial question is like, do you have to store the data multiple times? And the answer is, I would say, is no. It's an object store, but you've got links, right? So you can link multiple objects together. Is an Isar link like? Does it like create a future? Do you have to go fetch it as a separate step, or does when you do a fetch with the link, does it get everything all at once?
You have to fetch it separately. I'm currently working on embedded objects that are stored together with the original one.
So something that I kind of came across in the past, and that has been doing this kind of like partial versus full model kind of system, where like you get enough of your model up front, but when you want to use the entire model, a good example of this is like, let's say the master detail kind of view, where you kind of have like a list of information which show the titles of something, so you need to query all those titles. So you want like a barest of metadata from your initial request, and then when you tap on that item, you go to the detail page, you want to get the full object from the database. And having to do that kind of mechanism over and over and over again, you kind of end up having to like abstract that away to kind of either in your model or how you do the accesses. I kind of like the idea that, they're of something like that with a database solution, so that you can say, give me all of these, and then go get the linked data as like a separate step, like fill out the models to 1 level deep, or maybe to 2 levels deep. So then if they've got other relationals from those, you can go that extra level. So you can make an informed decision on how you want to access that data, what might be more performant for your app and your use case.
That would be super cool. Also, Isar supports composite indexes.
Nice.
And what I thought about is implementing composite indexes across links. That would be super powerful, but unfortunately quite hard to implement.
So when you're doing these queries, I noticed in your examples that you like the example here that I'm looking. I should bring this up on stream. I don't want to bring this up on stream. There you go. You kind of have this like Isar users where name starts with Dan, limit 10, find all. This is very much that kind of like I kind of, when I see find, I think MongoDB, but that kind of like that kind of structure. Is there a way of doing like with the where side of things, doing like all filters, doing comparisons between one set of objects in the database and another set of objects in the database? Or is that something that is you would do in the Dart side, so it has like a predicate that it runs for each comparison or something?
What? Sorry, I think I didn't get the question.
Sorry, let me be clear. So let's say I've got a list of users and a list of posts, right? Yeah. And I want to say, give me all the posts for this user, right? So I need to now go for every post and confirm that each user is a particular ID number or something like that. Is there, is that sort of check? is that just like a parameter that's sent across, like a function that's being sent down that's making the comparison, or is that something you can do? I don't know.
You can query links, and it actually runs another query on that link. It works much like a join.
Right.
And the difference between where and filter is where uses an index, and filter is just anything that you can do, like and, or, and so on. And where is a little more restrictive, but it uses an index instead.
Gotcha.
All righty. We've got a couple of questions. Sahar, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. The main thing I see from your questions is you probably really want to dig into state management itself, just the overall concept and everything. When to use blocker provider, really that's a question of when are you going to try to use state management, period. And that basically comes down to what they call, if I remember correctly, ephemeral state, or is it it's app state. When you have to share the state across various widgets is a big part of that. And then also the other one right here is, how do you know which provider is used? I mean, you're setting it up. So you have to use either in your consumer widget or in your consumer, you have to tell it what provider to use. So I don't know how else to put that. You need to keep track of your providers and your types and your instances. But the other thing too is one thing that can really help out with the general knowledge. If you do a YouTube search for pragmatic state management in Flutter, it was a talk by, was it Matt Sullivan and Philip? I never try to pronounce Philip's name. I believe it's right.
I always recommend Majid's talk. Majid's talk he did at JoyCon London, where he talked about every state management solution possible. And that way I don't have to talk about it ever again because he's done it. To be fair, they just said here, Google recommended provider. The thing here is go learn them and see what makes the best fit for what you're building, right? Try them out. If it works, done. Use it, Don't fret about which one you should be using. Choose one. Does it do what you want it to do? Yes. Done.
There is another thing, actually, Simon. I mean, people always think that if they, for example, go and learn block, that means they always have to use block. I mean, there was actually an app recently I was working, and actually I used block and riverpod. I'm not using provider because Remy said don't use it anymore, right? So riverpod. So I used riverpod and actually, block both of them, because for different scenario you need to find a good solution, right? So each of them works perfectly for one solution that another one might not work, right? So just think about what kind of problem you're trying to solve and choose the best for that one. Just do not look for the best state management, because that doesn't exist.
Okay, and Sahar, we can't just tell you. Okay, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. We can't just say, "Oh, here, do this." What is your situation? What are you trying to accomplish? How big is your app? I'm not going to tell you to do Redux on a 3-page app. And I'm not going to tell you to use set state in an app with 500 screens. I mean, there is no magic, there is no simple answer. And Majid is telling you the truth. You have to look at it, at the situation, and figure out which one to use. The way that you know that is you learn each one and you see how they work. Right, Simon?
Yeah, I was going to say, he's got two there. Pick one, do it. And then if it does what you want it to do, you don't have to choose the other one. You've got it.
Well, and the other thing, too, is please don't ask us how you pick. I think that's what you're getting at, because that involves meetings with 10 developers and 4 stakeholders and somebody from C-level who really shouldn't even be there. Okay. Who are going to be there for 8 hours arguing about what state management to use.
Yeah, anyway, let's move on. That is it for state management.
answer
We're not
that.
doing any more about state management. I have decreed. That's it. For this one, that is state management over. Let's move on. Have we got any more database questions? That's the question.
Yes. Let's see here. Which database is best? No. Which database storage or cache is used to show data while the offline?
Which database or storage or cache used to show the data?
I've heard of this one that begins with an I that might work for that.
Isar.
Isar, yes.
It's literally what we're talking about. Yeah, use that. There you go. Problem solved.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the point here is make up a model that has the fields that you want in your cache. Add a field called expiry that has a date timestamp, and now you can query against that and say, give me the things that are before this date, or delete the ones that are after this date, or whatever else. Done. You've got your lovely cache written with Isar. Done. It's not. Yeah.
Okay.
You just have to think about what you're trying to do. But yeah, you can definitely do that. The point here is that you add the annotations to your models, you generate the code, and you've got the flexibility you need. That's the interesting point behind this, right?
All right.
I've got whilst we're waiting for some more questions, and you're choosing one.
Well, we've got lots more questions. In fact,
I'm taking priority for one question.
Well,
so how does the database handle migrations or upgrading models? So let's say I ship my app with a model with 5 fields, and then I remove one of those fields and add 2 more. What happens with the database when I start the app up next? Does it say you've got the invalid data because it's the model's different, or does it? What happens?
As long as you follow the rules, and the rules are basically just don't change the type of a field. You can add fields, remove fields, but don't change them.
Yeah.
Then it basically doesn't need migration because the format is backwards compatible.
Is it possible? I'm kind of curious about this. Because I've been in several situations where I want to add a field to the database, but I want the data for that field not just to be one consistent default value. So I don't want. Let's say I want to add a boolean field, and I wanted the true or false value to be determined by the current data in the database. So, in essence, I can add that new field and give it default value of false. Every field gets false. Am I going to have to do the migration step every time the app starts up to say, is the version of the database different? If it's different, then I need to go through, select all the data from the database, then determine if I want to set that to true or false. You see what I mean? Like that's the migration step that I'm kind of like curious about. Without like Pragma versioning of the data store, I'm kind of like, how do I achieve that?
Isar doesn't help you with data versioning, but I would just make the field nullable and create a getter that handles the null case.
Right. So you could, I guess, if you're dealing with a domain model and then front end model, then you've got the nice separation where you can actually do that logic and say the first time I get this, if it's null, then determine what the value should be and write it back to the data store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to point out, we have a rule around here. No one is allowed to ask questions that Simon will talk about for more than 3 hours. Okay. Harsh, you just broke that rule.
How can we communicate with different programs by using Dart like FFI? Yeah, exactly. That's it. You've got it. FFI. That's how you do it.
But I
You've
think
answered
FFI
it yourself.
is just for C++, right?
No. Every language. Yeah, but so we just said that Simon 2 is using this for Rust with Dart, right?
Okay.
So the point here is just that when you compile your code in whatever external language it is, it has to be compilable, right? Because if it's not compilable, then you're running an interpreter, which is just process.start, right? You just run the interpreter with whatever script you want to run, right? And there's a lot of also interpreters things that there's actually I think there's a V8, there's a JS package which puts JavaScript in your app, and you can start running JavaScript if you really wanted to, right? And there's probably one for what's the other interpreted? There's a few like interpreted languages that you could also throw in. But anyway, how do you communicate with different programming languages? By using Dart, yeah, with the FFI. I mean, communicate is. So I will just. One thing, communicate. You're talking about communicate. Do you mean like Let me just want to make clear. You're talking about communication, but it's like, what do you mean between multiple processes, between over the network, between over the internet? Like when you talk about languages, we're assuming that you're meaning like in terms of programming, like or two different languages, and you want them two things to communicate, that's FFI. That's foreign function interface.
All right, we need to say goodbye to Majid and hello to Randall again. So now the gang's all together. Majid, the gang is about to not be all together.
Joining us.
Thank you for coming.
Bye. Thank you. See you next week.
All righty. This one's kind of got me scratching my head a little bit. Building a multiplayer game with Flutter. Now, I think this is specifically about the database. And if people are getting slow performance out of a database, it sounds like they're doing it wrong, because there's this little company I know there's a little company I know called Google, and they use databases to like do billions.
No, I tell you exactly what this is. No, I can tell you exactly what this is. And let me be clear. Databases are not for multiplayer gaming. They're not the same thing. So people have been using, and I can tell you exactly what this scenario is. People use Firestore or real-time Firebase real-time database.
Real-time
right?
database, yeah.
They use the watch capabilities to get notifications, and then when they get changed, they get updated, right? But that is not that's not meant for multiplayer gaming. That's not the same thing at all, right? The way multiplayer gaming works is just go look up just doing multiplayer gaming with networking, right? The idea of using a database is not the correct way of approaching that. I mean, you might have a database of both ends, but you don't need to communicate and store that data. It's ephemeral data a lot of the time, right? Like, is there a bullet flying in the air above you right now, or whatever other sort of things in the game? Like, there's a lot of state which is just you care to know about it, but it's nothing that needs to be stored in a database, right?
I imagine part of the problem would be people using an overbroad stream query because they want to know where everybody else is. But they don't really need to know where everybody else is. They need to know who the people near them are. So you need to push a lot of stuff out to Google Cloud Functions and stuff. Right,
but this is the thing, right? Like, so people do this with, like, let's say you have like a collection in Firestore that has a list of all the active users, and then they will go, give me all the active users in my game. Well, there's no like magical index for that. That's the database. The database doesn't work that way, right? So now you have to have a separate collection, which is for each game that then links to. I mean, it just goes nuts, right? And then you go, well, if I'm trying to look at who am I? Let's say I'm making like a first-person shooter, and you want to know who is in your local vicinity because you want to render them. You need a quad tree. That is the mechanism that you use to, or BSP or some other sort of mechanism that, like a binary tree, something that kind of isolates your portion of the map to your user. And to do that, it's like, great, you don't query the entire database for every user that's in the entire multi-user world to say who's in my local area, and there's like no one, right? Like, that's just like I'm going to get 10 gigabytes of data to go and check the entire 10 gigabytes on my client side to go, I only want 3 users, right?
Right, yeah. Database design for this stuff, you're right, is really a different sort of an art style. And you really need to understand the problems. You really need to understand how to minimize the amount of data coming over the wire, because otherwise you're going to lag.
Yeah.
All righty.
Go look up network protocols, UDP. That'll also put you in the right direction as well for some things.
Yes.
Here we go.
And the difference between that and TCP/IP, which actually requires a response. But anyway, this is a shared preferences question about how to read from shared preferences during launch. And honestly, I mean, right here in the shared preferences plugin, it specifically goes right into writing and reading data.
I think the problem here, and I know exactly what the problem here is, a lot of people don't realize you can turn your main function into async.
And then go fetch from shared preferences, and then
you can just do an await inside your main function for your shared preference to choose what widget you want to show.
See, and people don't realize in this, people don't realize that the splash screen is serving a purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just there to look pretty; it's there to delay people so that they have something to look at while you're running around trying to get ready.
Another thing you'll see in like the Flutter UI documentation, for example, is like just use a future builder that goes off and starts your app up and initializes whatever state it needs before you literally initialize your material app. Your material app is just a widget. Your app widget is just a widget. So you can go initialize this other widget over here, which is your splash screen. And once you finish doing the initialization, showing like a nice spinner and animation, whatever else you want on the screen, you just go, okay, my future's resolved. I've got the data. Now switch it out with my material app and show the rest of my app. You can just do that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
One of the things I've discovered recently is that you can call run app twice in main. And that means you can actually call run app with a very lightweight spinner widget, get it started, get it running, and then call a bunch of stuff with a wait to get all your stuff initialized and all really finally set up, and then call run app again with your actual main. That is a crazy cool technique.
The other thing that I think is quite surprising is another technique that people don't realize that after you do run app, it continues running the main function. Like it doesn't stop running the function. Right? It's not. It just initializes the UI with this thing. It'll go off and do the UI and spin up the threads and handle the button clicks. No, the main function continues.
Right.
So you can do whatever you want.
It doesn't even return a future, right?
No.
What
Run
the run app?
Run app doesn't. No. Run app just runs.
Yeah, it just spins up the UI and just gives the root view
it designates the root view as that widget that you just created inside run app. Yeah.
And then does all the binding initialization, right?
Right.
Okay. And this is a great question, especially considering your other questions. This is perfect.
None.
The best book, number one, it's not a book. This is way better than any book.
The internet.
Okay.
Yes.
There's that too, yes. But a particular part of the internet is the highly subjective roadmap for Flutter development by Alexander Luchenko, who happens to be the husband of, what did you just do? You broke it.
Okay.
Anyway, he and Anna Luchenko are a wonderful couple who are wizards in Dart and Flutter and have done all kinds of great things. Now, this roadmap will walk you through the basics, okay, and then Flutter itself from basic widgets, design patterns, networking, simple persistence, like we're talking about with shared preferences and other simpler things. Then you get deeper, going into architectural patterns, languages, advanced Dart package managers. And then when you get into CI/CD analytics and publishing to the stores, now you're probably able to get a job somewhere in here. What do you think, Simon?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that area.
I mean, learn.
But
Keep learning.
This is
Never
the
stop
best
learning.
place.
Where's GetX on that chart?
Oh, shut up.
That's it. You're banned. That's it. Never come back.
Oh, but where did I just put it? Hang on, it's here somewhere. We've actually got this on a permanent banner.
Oh yeah, pop the link in the chat as well. Anyway,
I already did.
I'm gonna pick up
but that's where you want to be.
Oh, yeah, that place there. Right. Any metaprogramming, any updates? I've not heard of any. We're not running for the Flutter. Again, just to repeat, we may wear some Flutter tops, but we do not work for the Flutter team. Full stop. Right? We are community members just like you. Okay.
The number of people who work for Google on this stream right now is 0.
So it's an open source project. So they have. So if you're kind of looking for these kind of updates, the tickets are there. You can go read them.
The last update to the roadmap was January, but that doesn't mean things haven't happened since then. So it might be commits.
Yeah, but I mean that roadmap is really supposed to be, by the time you get
guide to get into
2/3 of the way through that roadmap, you can already pretty much guide yourself.
Yeah.
You've reached a point where you know enough about what you're doing that you know what you need to go learn.
I'm talking about the macros roadmap.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that hasn't been updated since January. So, but that was mostly just an overview to get you into it. But I was looking for some more recent updates to kind of tell people macros are going to be amazing. Really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to replacing a lot of our uses of Builder with it because it's just gonna be amazing.
Isn't it? It's in here somewhere, right?
Yeah, I did it by I looked for macros overview something.
If you go to the language repository and the macro issue there, it has a
Oh.
lot of
Yeah,
up-to-date
that's there
information.
too. Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. That's going to be where the up-to-date stuff is. I should go look at that.
That's not right.
No.
I think you can
don't
even
think
find
that's the
it by
page you're looking
Googling.
for.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a project. This is the project board I was looking for. It's the one in here, isn't it? Yeah, language funnel. That's the one. I knew it's there somewhere. Yeah, this is what we're looking for. Static meta programming. There you go. So this is where you want your. So I'll put the link to the project the language funnel in there. This board, and this is where you can try and do language features that they're working on, being spec'd, being discussed, all this kind of stuff. What's been implemented, what's been done, right? It's all open source, and here is the static meta programming and the current documentation. You can go read all of this stuff that I'm not reading right now. Last updated 2 days ago. Go read it. Maybe cool stuff. So I will mention though, that there was so something that I was looking at the other day. So there's a chap who was speaking about his package the other week, Jasper. You go check it out if you haven't seen this package. Highly recommend it. But he also did this super annotations, which I found really super. The hassle-free static meta programming as you dream it. So basically, the concept here is you write your annotation classes in your normal code and with an apply method here, and that can output your code. So it's a really nice way of basically being able to annotate your classes and have code generation within your project. Super powerful, really slick. And I want to run this before, after my code generation. It has here's a good let's see if I can find it. There's a quick example down here actually.
So this is still with a builder step.
Yes, still with builders. Yeah, you still have your builder step, right? But the point here is that it puts the onus of sort of code generation within your project, which really super powerful. I can't say that enough.
Excellent.
So you can see here,
Excellent.
you can see, look, my annotation. You just pop that on your whatever your class you want, and then your my annotation is a class. It extends class annotation, which means you can put in a class. And then, you get your class as the target. And then here you can do whatever you want with the methods and output whatever code you want to the library builder output. And that's it. You'll generate some code. It goes in your .g file. And then he's actually got some examples here of using sealed unions or data classes or JSON serializable using this mechanism. So highly recommend that as a solution. I'll put the link in the chat to the package.
I think it's important to understand that contrasted with, say, something like the C preprocessor where you can insert stuff into other stuff, the code generation from macros is going to be semantic aware. So it's going to understand that you're in a class definition that has this annotation, that has these member variables. And that's way better than...
I'm so excited for it, to be honest. It really is.
Yeah.
It's not just macros. Simon 2, imagine using the static meta programming for yours. No builder step, it just works. You just change the annotations, right?
I already prepared everything for it. It's basically ready to switch. And if you go in, there is a private package shipped with Dart, and it already contains the API for meta programming. You can see it if you go through the issue. It has some details on the API.
There you go. Insider knowledge right there. Community insider knowledge.
There we go. All right. One other quick one for the beginners. Someone did check out the Christopher Akravi YouTube. Check out the design patterns and also the code talks, the code walks. Really, really good. And you can find that right there on YouTube. And the guy has a very entertaining style. You will definitely not fall asleep watching his videos. So, mountain duck, city duck, rubber duck.
Okay. Yes.
All right. Moving on to other questions. Since Flutter is supported by 6 different platforms, I think it's the other way around, but that's okay. What's the biggest Flutter challenge? Well, I don't think the Flutter challenge videos are still being made, but what's the biggest challenge for the future?
I mean, it's this. I mean, to me, I read this question as, what is the biggest challenge for Flutter in the future, considering it supports 6 different platforms?
And that's Enzo. We're just having fun with it.
Yeah, I think the oh, I guess ran all the way back. The I don't think there's anything like cross-platformy that kind of, what's the word? That would be a problem. I can't since, because of FFI, because of the methodologies that have been implemented from day one with Flutter to support multiple platforms, there's no big challenge with Flutter supporting things on multiple platforms. I think that from under the hood, right? So from us building Flutter apps, there's no big challenge, right? But from under the hood, obviously, with like example here is like Metal, right? Metal came along as a fundamental change to the rendering system on iOS. And now Flutter has to change the way it does the rendering to match with Metal to support iOS going forward into the future. So, but these are always going to be the case. So if Windows turn around and say, no, we're not going to support this API and this function or whatever that's inside inside their libraries and framework that Flutter requires, then Flutter's going to have to change. This is the nature of building something that's multi-platform, though. So there's and frankly, that's not really a problem, right? Like they give you enough, like, for a platform to make this change, they give you enough like pre-warning and enough time to make any migration that you need to make away from that technology. And we, as an industry, need to, going forward, is it? Can I?
Randall, I think you're having some.
Yeah, I've muted your microphone, Randall. Sorry. Yeah. So
Randall's microphone keeps going. It when he's sitting there quietly, it thinks there's something wrong with the noise canceling, so it just keeps lowering the noise canceling until he gets something.
Anyway. So what the hell was I saying? Can't be that important. No, it's gone. What was it? No, it doesn't matter. Anyway,
biggest, actually, I do see one challenge, but the challenge isn't so much with Flutter. The challenge is going to be, again, yet another misunderstanding. We've had several misunderstandings over time with Flutter. I can't even remember the very first one that was really frustrating. We had to beat into people. The current one that we're looking at is use Flutter for web apps, not websites. And another fundamental misunderstanding that's going to be coming down the pike more and more and more is you don't get to write it once and then just magically run it everywhere and it suddenly works. You write it once and then you can reuse about 80% of your code in a different platform, maybe 90. Okay. So you're going to have to make some small tweaks here and there. Windows is a little bit different than Mac. Mac is a little bit different than Android. Android is different than iOS. So don't just change your compile target and expect it to magically work. You're going to have to make a couple of adjustments here and there. And the whole thing that it comes back to, people get an expectation and then cry Flutter sucks when it doesn't do that. Now, again, one of the other ones that we had early on, people were like, well, why doesn't Flutter just have support for the camera natively? And why doesn't it, just do things? I mean, Android just does things. You don't have to worry about. Number one, Flutter's a UI toolkit. It's not an operating system. That was the one I was thinking of. It took a long time to beat it into people that Flutter is not an operating system. It's not expected to access the hardware directly. It's not supposed to.
And it's never going to be.
People were screaming. Yeah, on Reddit, people were screaming, "Oh, Flutter sucks because I have to use a package to access the camera." And I'm like, you know what? I can say Android sucks because it doesn't fold my laundry. That doesn't make it true. So anyway, we're going to have to battle this whole thing with people just expecting it to work on all platforms without having to do any tweaks. And that's just unrealistic.
I think one small challenge is to motivate package maintainers to support all the platforms.
Yeah.
Because it's really bad experience if you want to compile your app and one of your packages doesn't support Android.
One of the things about this though has been like just the push for pub has updated recently the way it does the filtering, so that you can filter for packages that support the platforms you're looking at. And the other thing is like what we've been doing the Plus plugins. I say I have not been doing it, but the community and the people that work on the Plus community packages have been, specifically trying to support before the desktops are a thing, the desktop platforms, because we want to have that capability for the base fundamental packages. So I think the more popular a package is, the more it should be considered to support all the platforms. But to ask a single developer to go learn iOS, to go learn Mac, to go learn Android is a difficult sell, right? Like for anyone. But then this kind of like the community has to come together. If you're a Mac developer and you see a Mac, this package does not have Mac support that you want to use, add the support, send a PR, because no doubt that probably the author has never done Mac before and doesn't know what they're doing to do that, right? So we all like as these platforms grow, we're going to get an influx of developers from those different platforms, and we all need to work together to support the package community as a whole.
Okay, moving on.
Questions, 34 minutes.
Yes.
24 minutes.
So basically, we got to call the questions now. No more questions. Richard's will be last because we doubt that we're going to get done with what we've got. Okay, riverpod. The when function is rather convenient. Is there a way to do the same thing for multiple providers at once? For example, for one. Okay, so what you're wanting to do
Randall has an answer.
When kind of like with streams.
Hang on, Scott. Hang on, Scott.
I know. Let me finish the sentence.
Go.
Now you made me forget. What's the one with futures? Future.wait. So looking for something that's similar to that with riverpod. Randall, riverpod's your favorite hobbies.
So typically, riverpod's one of my favorite things to advocate about. One of the ways you would do this is you would create a sort of a super provider that would be watching the other two or three.
Do you mean a proxy provider?
What?
A proxy provider.
A proxy provider. Well, no, it's not called a proxy provider in riverpod.
No,
it's just another layer of provider.
He said, "Oh, I thought you meant in provider package." Sorry, I misread it.
No, and in riverpod, what they do is they're using nested providers.
Right.
Yeah, so basically you have one provider that is watching two other providers and can generate a synthetic state from that. So it can generate arbitrary async data calls, like say we're still waiting because one of them is waiting, or we now have the data, so here's the data, or we had an error in one of the two legs, so here's the error. So you basically create an artificial async data return from this future provider, and then it can watch whatever combination of other providers you have. And it works really, really well. It's really nice that this all stacks nicely in riverpod, and is much, much, much easier than doing the same thing in provider, where you do have to use proxy provider and things like that.
Cool. We have another Isar question. Simon, are you awake over there? You've been kind of sitting quietly.
I'm ready.
You're ready. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is Isar a good choice for something like a 25 meg music file?
I would argue no database is a good choice for that. Store it in a file system and store the link in Isar.
So
and
Richard,
all the metadata and everything.
Yes. So Richard, it's the same reason why Git doesn't support large files. Right? It's not a good convention to do that, right? What you want to do is you go get application directory, application data directory from the path provider. Then you create a directory on top of that. So you do like / my music store, right? Whatever. You put when you download those files or save those files or generate those files, however you're doing it, you put the files in there, and then you take that path, which is just going to be my music store / whatever the file name is, and put that in your database in Isar. Then when you get that database, when you get the data back out of the database, you know where it is on the file system to go fetch it from the data folder and play it to the user or whatever you're trying to do. So you always split your data this way, because large binary data doesn't change. There's no lookup, there's no indexing on that. You try and keep blob data outside of a database in general. I mean, there's no, I don't know if is there a reason why that you couldn't do that with, I mean, does it support, I'm kind of curious for Simon, does it support uint 8 list? Like,
it does, yeah. You could totally store it in the database.
So you could just blob data in there, and you could do that. I don't know.
You could.
I mean, it wouldn't be any less performant from my understanding of what goes on underneath.
No, but you would use up
it'd be in memory.
Virtual memory.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Like you what you end up doing is like, let's say you had like, let's just say you had 10 of those. That's 250 megabytes of RAM, essentially, or virtual memory that you're trying to have running at any one time, just to be able to navigate between them. So you'd be more beneficial to have all the metadata for a lot more data entries in that space, and then just load the file from disk when you want to use it.
Depending on the device, iOS gives you around 4 to 6 gigabytes of virtual memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily about the virtual memory at that point, though, because you become like a heavy use application.
Yeah, you totally shouldn't do it.
Yeah, you just be friendly. So here's the thing, like, I'm sorry, I won't go on this route much longer, but a lot of developers treat their applications the only application that's running, which really frustrates me, because it's never the only application running, even on a PC. How many apps do you have open? Like, you can't just have one app that just thinks, oh, I've got a 3 gigahertz processor and 4 gigabytes of RAM available to me, right? That's just, always conserve.
Don't count the number of processes running.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's insane. Like, you start thinking, like, the amount that computer does now. And the problem is, if you just treat your application as like, it's got all this virtual memory, it's got all this stuff, it's going to get into problems, right?
Okay. We've got a couple more of the beginner questions. Let me point this one out. Multi-provider does not necessarily rebuild the whole screen. You really want to read the documentation for that one. It will help you out a whole lot. And regarding patterns in Flutter, definitely look at the Christopher Akravi videos. To give you an idea, in Flutter, really the patterns that are being used are the composite pattern, the state pattern, the observer pattern. If you write code the way Simon does, then you're also going to be using the facade pattern, which is known by a lot of people as repositories. So those are patterns. Now, as far as those architectures you're talking about, they don't really fit Flutter perfectly. And really, it's a matter of building a reactive architecture. Now, you will find if you go into something like Block, it kind of hands you the structure.
Let me take this a step back and say MVC and MVVM exist to solve the problem that Flutter already solves. That is UI reacting to state, right? They're literally there. The whole idea of presenters and model and view models are there because the hierarchy of UI would never match that of the app state, and you had to manage that in yourself. With the way
that's what Flutter is doing under the hood.
Yeah, with Flutter being able to like manipulate the UI the way it does with the declarative model that it has, you end up in the situation where you always want the UI to react live to state. You do that with streams, right? Or you do it with futures, and they're the kind of things that mean that the data changes the back end, the UI changes.
And the other thing too, it's very much like garbage collection. Okay, you don't have to worry about that type of an architecture for doing reactive state management and reactive updates. Flutter's doing that. That's what the whole thing is about. And it's also like garbage collection. We don't have to do our own garbage collection. It's handled. So we have people for that. A lot of them are in Amsterdam. Anyway, let's see here. Another Isar question. What is the state of Dart over the back end if you use an Isar database? Pretty good.
Is that state of the art over what? Where's this?
I think that might be a question leaning toward the state of using Dart full stack, possibly with Isar as a database.
I mean,
that's the way I read it.
I think we did speak about this early on in the show, which was like Isar uses Dart and uses FFI, so you can run that on the server side. The practicality of running on the server side is more about management of the data, and I think, in my honest opinion, you need to work on that. The tooling needs to be more matured to really use it in that scenario. Like, you want to have the ability to easily, as I said, back up and restore databases, do migrations, manage the database. It's about the management side of things if you're doing server-side databases, right? Having there's not the original. I mean, I'm assuming, and please tell me if I'm wrong, Simon, too, but it's not the original use case for Isar is not that, right? The original use case for Isar is the SQLite kind of database in an app, right?
And I would say an embedded database is almost never the right choice for a server. It doesn't scale well, and there are much better solutions for servers, in my opinion. Only if you need something very simple, then it could be right for you, but otherwise.
I do have this thing in the back of my mind. I do want to see what it's like, because the underlying LMDB is just super amazing. So I wonder what it would be like to have it as a solution for backend and what that might mean.
It can certainly handle a lot of data, but it won't synchronize between your servers, for example.
Yeah.
All right. We've got some complicated ones coming up. So if you have asked your question at 1:38 or before, we're going to get there. But if you notice, I'm trying to take them from simpler to harder. So when we get to the two-parter here regarding the stack, that's going to be last, because we're going to be on that one a while, I think, possibly.
Let's see how we get.
Anyhow, let's see. Is it practical to use an isolate for game sounds?
Is it practical to play game sounds in an isolate? I'm not sure why you'd want to. So the point here is playing the isolate doesn't take any time from your app. You're telling the operating system to go play this music. If you're using a package,
in a way, it is already now happening on another thread or isolate, because it's being handled by somewhere else.
The native package or the operating system should be reading the data and queuing it up to the sound card or the sound device of the operating system for playback. That's nothing that you should be handling yourself. So
it's not even possible from
tap it.
Yeah,
it's not even possible to do I/O from the non-main isolate anyway, right?
You can do I/O from the non-main isolate, I believe. You can't
use platform channels.
You can't use okay. You can use platform channels, but you have to initialize them again. There's a whole. It didn't used to be. You couldn't use platform channels in background isolates. You can now, because that's literally how the background stuff works. The Android, a good example of this is Firebase messaging, and for the background Dart stuff that happens, because it actually communicates to the isolate, and the isolate communicates over a method channel to the front end isolate, and that picks it up. There's some magic that happens, right?
That's so cool.
It's cool. It's magic, but you can do it, but it requires a little bit of sound. But yeah, anyway, completely off topic there. Yeah, shouldn't have to play audio with an isolate in the background.
All right. Is it possible to add and remove items from a list view without rebuilding the whole list view? Good news. The only part of the list view being built is pretty much what you can see and one or two more. So you're not rebuilding this whole monstrosity.
Yeah. If you have
what's visible.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Roberto. If you have 1,000 items, right, you should be using, like, it doesn't matter how many items. So if you have, let's say you have 10,000 items in your list view, not all 10,000 items are being built or being examined when scrolling through your list view. It's only the portions visible on the screen. That's if you're using an item builder. If you're not using an item builder, using the children constructor, you're insane. You should not do that. Go use an item builder. So the
you don't want to do it that way, and this is going to come up again.
Hold on. I'm going to cover this as well. Caveat this, that every one of your children in your list view should have a key, a value key attached to it at least, and that just differentiates it between the other children. And this is very key, because when a rebuild happens, those that keep the same can reuse those parameters, and it'll know that they've not changed even when they've scrolled around in the list and the order's changed. And those widgets will not be rebuilt. None of the render objects will be rebuilt. None of them will be set new parameters because they match. So make sure you use value keys in any widget that has siblings of the same type, and you'll guarantee you get the best performance.
And I think it needs to relay. Sorry, go ahead, I think it needs to relay out the items before the viewport if you don't use the static extent, or how is it called? If your items can have different height, it needs to remeasure all of the previous items.
No, it doesn't. No. So it maintains what it's the position it's got previously. I know what you're saying. I know what you're suggesting. It doesn't measure the items previously in the list. It only measures them to get to that place in the scroll position in the list. So it is complicated though, and this is an overarching problem of just having this notion of think about the Twitter notification feed of like an infinite list of data. Is just you just can't physically say scroll to a certain point, right? Because it's not feasible to do that, right? Because you'd have to know the height of everything previous to scroll to that point. So the trickery that happens in these apps is they do like a warping, which is they go to an offset of 1 million, let's say, just a random number, and they say from 1 million going back, that's going back in time. From 1 million going forward, that's going forward in time, or vice versa. And when you get to the point where there's no more data, it stops you from scrolling. But you might be at position 100,000 in pixels, right? Like the number doesn't make a difference. It's just the scroll offset delta, so the difference in scroll position. But anyway, we're completely off topic here. Let's get
all right
back to
now. Speaking of the children versus item builder, and you wouldn't want to do it that way. I hear this a lot at work. There's somebody always telling me, well, you just don't want to do it that way. You want to do it this other way. I wonder who that could be. Anyway, opening a dialogue, and that dialogue is going to open another one. Simon, you want to take this over?
What you can do, but before I open another one, I'd like to pop the current one. I can tell you exactly how you solve this. So inside your routes, you actually have two animations you're given. You're given a opening animation and like an entering animation and exiting animation. I forget they're called animation 1 and animation 2 or something like that. They're terribly named. Let me just bring this up.
Well, and the other question too is, would you want to do something like have a content widget inside of one dialogue and have that changing its state instead of changing different dialogues? That's a possibility as well.
Where is it?
Or even something like a page view.
That's it. Secondary animation. So the animation of the route that's being pushed on top of this route. This animation lets the route coordinate the entrance and exit transition of the route that's popped on the other. Basically, why in the exact same scenario that you're talking about, I've done this before, where you can use a page route builder or whatever one you want to control the display of your dialogue, and simply fade out the dialogue behind when you bring in the new dialogue. And that way, when they go back from that dialogue, it'll come back. You never have two dialogues on the screen overlaid on top of each other, which is just really, really bad UX, right? You can also just do navigator, like if you're trying to pop it, like physically get rid of it, not just let them go back to it. Or when they go to the second one, they finish it, do pop twice to get rid of both, right? You can do that as well. If just do pop. So before you do another one, navigate.pop, then do push, and then your new dialogue route.
All right. And that leaves us with one.
I see
it
two.
It is a two-parter.
Oh. Hey, part one.
All right. I need to take a breath for this. Part one. The stack depends on a consumer widget, and it refreshes frequently, unless it refreshes more often than half a second. Should I watch once and pass data to the children, or use a consumer widget for each child and watch the same? Now, I would definitely not be using a consumer, well, for each.
Depends on what you're doing.
Here's part 2. Some clarification.
This is not clarification. This is insanity. Okay.
You see why I kept this one for last.
New widget in, or I see what he's getting at. It's like, do I do one consumer and rebuild these widgets, or do I do a consumer for each one and let them rebuild themselves? And frankly, that's like, well, are you adding and removing from your overall data set? Because the very first one is about you kind of want both, right? You want each widget to monitor itself. So if the metadata that's internal to that widget changes, it can update itself. But then if you want to add stuff to this stack and remove stuff from this stack, right, like the set of widgets, then you're going to want a consumer and to watch the data around the entire thing. And that depends on your use case. You say you're doing this very frequently. It sounds to me like you kind of get to a point, and less than half a second is not very frequent, to be honest. I mean, it's frequent, sure, but it's not like 60 frames a second, right? Like that's what I'm trying to get, right? So it's about the overhead. So if you've got, like, say, let's say you got 50 widgets in there, right? Well, that's a 50 consumers all reporting back and listening to. They should just be listening to a provider or whatever you're using, whatever this is, like riverpod or whatever. They should just be listening to doing a select. Let's say with riverpod or provider, they're doing a select on only the data that they care about, right? So, but what's going to happen is each time there's an update every half a second, every 50 of those widgets is going to get the update call. They're going to go through the select, and only the ones that return back different data from their select is going to get rebuilt on the screen, right? So this is your opt out, where you can do both. Then at the top layer, if your number, again, you do a select on the top layer, and if the count of widgets changes, like you add or remove one, or you can do a hash or something a bit more intelligent, then yeah, those can change. Again, yeah, I don't know. It's great. I mean, the thing is, if you're doing sprites, if you're making widgets be sprites, at some point, yeah, you probably want to be using a game engine rather than doing it yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, now we have Flutter game engines.
Yeah, I mean, but as a learning thing, if you're trying to learn state management, using this as to learn state management, I'd say, yeah, as I said, use select. Go look up what select does for you, because that essentially,
and it's the select function within. Well, the select functions in provider is in riverpod.
Yeah, there's a select in riverpod as well.
Okay. It is still in riverpod. Okay.
And the general, you can, if you don't want to use, and for those that want to understand this a bit more, you can also look up, if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, you can go look up inherited model and its aspect driven approach of updates. And it's the same thing. Basically, the idea is, let's say, I'll give an example here. Let's say you've got a model with 1,000, let's say you've got a data model in the back end with 1,000 fields, but only one of them you care about to rebuild your widget. Well, if every other field is updated every second, but that one is not updated, your widget keeps getting rebuilt for no reason, right? So what the select does, it says only choose this data, and if this data changes in this entire model, then update my widget. So it allows you to selectively update your widgets based on if the data has changed.
See, and before we had this, I had put together a little something, and I had a discussion with Remy about it. In short, it had a value notifier, a bunch of value notifiers for every member in the model. And then the model also extended change notifier. So what was happening there is I could update when any individual member changed. And if there were times that I wanted to refresh on an update of anything in the whole model, then that's when the change notifier would come into play. But otherwise, I was just picking and choosing individual members by using the value listenable builders that went with those value notifiers. But it was cumbersome. It got the job done, but it looked like an explosion in a spaghetti factory when you started trying to follow this. And then Remy came along with what he did, and it's no longer necessary anyway. Okay, it is 58 minutes after the second hour.
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes, and there's 2 more questions that are left in the chat. So I'm going to quickly grab them. What use Flutter Builder with List View Builder if I have a list of document snapshot? No, don't use that. Snapshot is a stream. Use a stream builder. Problem solved. Yeah, that was that one. And then Richard came back with the big music files need to be shareable amongst a limited number of you. Again, it's the same thing. You still have one data store, because if you've got one installation of an app, it accesses all its own files. You control the access by those users of your app, right?
Okay,
so
I think though what they're talking about is, do you want to use a database locally or a database remotely? And the answer, I believe, is neither. You want to use the file system locally and use a file system out somewhere on the net.
I mean, to be honest,
download it.
If you want the most efficient thing, you would have it in some cloud buckets or whatever online. You download them, you store them. Once you download, you only ever want to download a file once. You don't have to keep going back to a URL and downloading it down each time the user accesses that content, right? So the idea of a caching or local files and put it there. Then you would put that, as I said earlier, the local path in your database, and then every time the user wants to access that content, it doesn't need to go to the server anymore. It goes to the local file system, reads it from there, right? That way, you now have an offline first app, right? Like it
UX point. UX point.
Come on.
Make sure you include a button that allows the user to remove that file locally. Because if you're sharing media files and you forget that, they're just going to keep building up all these files that are going to be eating up their space.
So one of the things that apps, at least in apps in general, provide is the idea of cache directories. So Path Provider has get cache directory, I think it is, or get application cache directory. And the idea is that when you have these temporary files like caches, you put them in there, and then the user has the ability to do cleanup storage, and it will get rid of all the cache directories from all the apps and allow them to clean up that stuff. If you try and access the data and it no longer exists in the file system, you should have a nice clear way of saying, okay, I'm going to go download it again, right? These are the kind of things that you do as an app builder.
By the way, I hate to say it, but there is another, we've got more state management on the way. For all those who remember SUSE Linux.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, another.
And
another. Well, you actually,
when all else fails, remember.
There's a
widget for that.
Right. Well, I think that's it. That's us wrapping up. Thank you, Simon, so much for joining us. And I think I'm honestly, it's the kind of thing that I would use Isar in every project. That's the kind of feeling I have from it. So I expect good things in the future.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and we'll see you next week.
Next week.
Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.